Hi, everybody. Welcome to our third UCC webinar for emergency managers here at the colleges and universities. It's always great to be interacting with you. And this week, we will be talking to a couple of the CEM commissioners on why it's important to get your CEM. And just before we get started, a couple announcements. One is don't forget about the Great Shakeout that will be starting October 17th, I believe, this year. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And I think it's important as colleges and universities to be involved with the Great Shakeout. It's a great opportunity to do an easy tabletop exercise and getting the community involved in something that they normally wouldn't think about as far as earthquakes. And as we know, we are active on the Pacific Rim, but we're also active elsewhere in the country. So just because you don't live in California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, you can still be affected by earthquakes. Also, Titan HST, they are one of the reasons why we're here today and able to pay for the webinar here. So please, if you have an opportunity to take a look at Titan HST, please do. They are a great company and they're really supporting emergency management. And then, of course, if you have to, I'm going to plug myself a little bit here. Please come check out EM Weekly. It's the weekly emergency management podcast that we've been putting on. This is our third season that we're going with this, so I'm excited about it. Great guests, and please check in. If you have any ideas for me, I'd love to hear them and keep moving that forward. So please check out EM Weekly as well. So that being said, I'd like to introduce our two guests. We have Keith and Jeff, and they are both from the CEM Commission. And Keith, you are the commissioner, correct? Keith, because he is the commissioner, and then Jeff is one of the assistant commissioners. And realistically, I guess I'll start the question the right way. I'm right now going through my CEM process, and I kind of resisted for a little bit for various different reasons. And I felt the need to do it now. And the reason why I felt the need to do it is, one, I talk about professionalizing our profession a lot, and I think that CEM is a step in the right direction. But why do you think it's critical, Keith, to have the CEM, and why should we support it as a profession?
Sure. The certified emergency manager really does a lot of things, and there are a lot of benefits there. And if Todd, I can jump right into my little spiel if that's okay with you. All right, great. Well, I just wanted to, first, while I pull this up, thank you, Todd, and the University and College Caucus for letting Jeff and I do a little brief to you all today, and more than anything, answer some questions that you might have about the application process itself. And there are a few key points about benefits and things that we're doing as a certification commission that I want to make you aware of that can remove some of those initial barriers that we note with many of our student populations and folks just getting into emergency management, and even the folks that have been around for a period of time but are just now pursuing certification. So I'm fortunate to represent 25 of who I believe are the hardest working professionals serving our profession, and those are the certification commissioners, and folks like Jeff Jelitz, who have been vice chair of the certification commission and played huge roles that I'm going to get into in just a second, really help make sure that our certification remains relevant and meaningful to emergency managers. We have emergency managers certified all over the world, with the vast majority of them being right here in the United States. You can see those numbers, and you can see the breadth and depth of experience that we're certifying around the world. And it doesn't stop with just geographic and geopolitical boundaries. It goes into almost every industry and sector you can imagine. We're certifying folks every review month. You're going to hear me talk just a little bit about the application process and program as I explain some of the benefits. And one thing I think that's absolutely critical is every candidate should definitely read this document, Principles of emergency management, which was written back in 2007, but is just wildly relevant to what IAEM believes is comprehensive emergency management. We really are standing on the shoulders of over 25 years of certification excellence. The certification program for IAEM has been around that long. We just celebrated our 25-year certified individuals, and we're having to consider how we're going to add another tier of certification for the folks that are now approaching 30 years of being certified emergency managers. The benefits for certification to us, and I'm going to ask Jeff to jump in just a second and tack on. Number one, it really, to me, as a hiring manager, it shows that there's dedication to the profession and yourself. And that really is two separate things. Number one, it shows that you are willing to give back to the profession, either at a local, state, national, international level, whether it's in your industry or in your sector. And it also shows that you're willing to better yourself. People that have AEMs and CEMs, you have to recertify these things, and you have to show a continuing progression of training, experience, and contributions back to the profession to maintain our certification. Benefits also include verified levels of training, experience, and contributions. When I see that resume, it stands out to me that somebody has pursued a meaningful certification in emergency management that's had a peer component or a peer review component where we're looking at your training experiences and contributions. And you're seeing it all the time now where jobs are requiring or at least preferring certification at the AEM or CEM level. And I live and work in Virginia, and I can say for sure that a lot of our job postings are requiring or preferring at least the CEM. Also, it's recognized around the world. While we don't have a complete grasp of all the places, every country and every sector throughout the world, you saw from that previous slide that we do have folks around the world who are certified, and they're looking for other people who are certified to join their organizations and serve in just all kinds of interests and workplaces. We're also, again, recognized across many sectors. You know, one of the questions that we get, and Jeff can certainly appreciate this, we see folks asking us about, can we create sector-specific certifications or industry-specific for, say, healthcare or financial tech like I'm in now? And we really believe that certification for CEM and AEM should prove that foundational base-level knowledge that is applicable across all sectors and industries. That way, the sectors and industries that want to take it to the next level can use the CEM as a springboard. Jeff, what other benefits you see that maybe I didn't capture?
Well, Keith, I think you've done a good job hitting most of them. I would agree that one of the great things about the certification is it crosses all different sectors. So you have CEMs who have a military background, who are in public health, government emergency management, myself in nonprofit. And one of the things that we like is it connects them to that broader profession of emergency management. And let's face it, within our own organization, we have a number of professional certifications that people aspire to. If you're in fundraising, there's a certified fundraising certification. If you're in accounting, there's accounting certifications, there's social work certifications. Well, this is a certification for emergency managers, and it's a nice way to quantify experience. Number two, it's a nice way to continue to show that you are engaged in the profession because you do have to recertify. That means more training every year. That means giving back to the profession. And for us, even in the Salvation Army, I supervise 8 state directors. 6 of them have their AEM or CEM, and we make it a job requirement within 2 years for folks to earn that credential as a mark of their commitment to the profession.
Thanks for that, Jeff. That well said, well put. Let me just share a few other key thoughts, and then we'll get to the real good stuff, which is hopefully a robust Q&A, where since I'm the chair, I'm going to delegate all the Q&A to Jeff. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. I appreciate you. Certification highlights include also, we want to make sure that our certification remains relevant. One thing that we definitely don't want to see is a steep attrition or folks that aren't pursuing recertification, and we dive in and we ask those folks the questions when that happens. And a few things that we're doing right now to help make sure that our certifications are remaining relevant and meaningful is, number one, our online examination launch. Back in March, we launched a new online exam that took the opportunity to review last year 435 of our questions that are in the question pool. I'll be candid and say that we rewrote, revised, or threw out over 60% of those questions because we just didn't feel like they adequately reflected today's emergency manager. And with the online examination, which was, by the way, in no small part, a major contribution from Jeff Jelitz and the Salvation Army and his team who built the online exam. Thank you so much, Jeff. We are able to track question by question which questions are being answered correctly and incorrectly. That way, we're validating to make sure that we're really testing knowledge and not just accidentally misasking something. In addition, we're constantly updating the requirements. The certification meets 4 or 5 times a year, depending on the year, and every piece of the exam and application is carefully scrutinized to make sure that we're asking the right questions. For example, we now only require 3 speaking contributions if you're going after that particular professional contribution, and we don't limit it by saying it has to be greater than 20 minutes because, hey, let's get this right. When I present in front of my CEO, I'm sure as heck not getting 20 minutes, you know that. We also revised our certification preparatory course, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then there's the whole increased access to certification. And we recognize that there are a lot of barriers out there. Chiefly among them is the dollars and cents. And you notice that I don't have a little bullet there to talk about how we're making it better, the dollars and cents. In fact, our fees for certification just rose at the discretion of the IAEM USA board to help offset the costs of operating the program. We do have an examination subcommittee that every year looks at pieces and parts of our exam to make sure it's accurate. If you are retired or active uniformed services, we actually have a group set up right now to crosswalk many of the major MOSs to certification so we can better connect our uniformed services and military personnel, not just in the United States, but around the world, to putting in a successful application. We also are looking at certification retention, which for us means how do we make sure that this remains a valuable and meaningful certification after you get your initial diploma, you hang it on the wall. 5 years from then, how do we make sure that you're recertifying? And then finally, our certification webinar series. This is the 3rd year that we've hosted a 4-part interactive webinar series, and you can find the recordings from those on our website. And they go through piece by piece and part by part the entire application process and what you need to do to submit a more successful application. A few final points. Number one, there's a certification portal. You know, a lot of folks say it's so hard to get started on certification. And having gone through it myself, I'll tell you what, you're right. And now that it's online, not the huge binders, and Jeff and I can tell you, those binder days were awesome when we'd walk in and see a stack of binders as tall as we were against the wall. But now you go in, you can open a portal account for free anytime and start documenting your progress towards submitting your application. Our certifications last 5 years, and take note of that red font there, and we'll make sure you get a copy of this presentation. Don't create 2 account portals, only create one, otherwise you might risk losing some of that valuable information. There are many pieces and parts to the certification, and we're not going to go through them here. I would encourage you to look through the certification webinar series, and they can tell you about what you really need for letters of reference. How do you categorize training? What kind of experience counts? What kind of education documentation do I have to provide? The one common theme across the entire application is this one-liner that we like to use, and that's third-party independent verification of claims. For example, if you say that you went to a conference and you provide us a registration that you went to the conference, does that mean you actually attended? Not so much. We're looking for that third-party independent verification, like a certificate or an email or a letter saying that you actually did attend. Just keep that in mind as you work through the process. There's plenty of resources available to you, whether it's the exam study guide, which was recently revised, and in fact will be revised again today. We also have the training allocation chart, which shows how you would break out some of those, say, independent study courses, or maybe you've made it down to FEMA's Center for Domestic Preparedness in Anniston, and you want to categorize those courses. How do you fit them in? That works too. We have tons of resources on the resource page of the certification program. And Jeff, can you tell us just a little bit about the value of mentors and how you've best seen mentors applied for this process?
Sure. As we've talked about, the process of certification can appear daunting. There's no reason that you have to go it alone. You can request to have a CEM mentor you through the process. That means everything from helping you make sure your documentation is in proper order. It's always nice to say, I've got this certificate. It's for training. Is this enough? And is this going to be emergency management or general management training? A current CEM or a current CEM commissioner who agrees to be your mentor can help you through that process. The other important part of it, in my opinion, there is kind of a best way to go about certification. It sure helps as you're preparing your training, and if you find some gaps, need to take a couple of extra courses, do that before you take the CEM exam, because taking some extra courses to meet your training requirement is going to give you a little bit more information so that when you get ready to take the examination piece, you stand a better chance of passing it. The other big piece of advice I would give, and why it's great to have a mentor, somebody who can walk you through that process, is when you get to the essay portion of the packet. So many people struggle with the essay, not because they don't know emergency management, but sometimes because they really struggle in putting it together and making sure they hit all what we call the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are essential to a passing emergency management exam. And so a mentor can really look at that at your essay and help make sure that you go through it. And for the mentor themselves, there's a great bonus. They can count that on their next CEM recertification as a professional contribution. We believe in the commission that investing in future CEMs, AEMs, growing the profession is extraordinarily important. And so we recognize that when we recertify as a step towards your recertification process.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And I'm pulling up on the screen now. You can see on our website where we have this really incredible tool where you can go in and search by discipline or by sector and find a mentor who has been vetted by the Certification Executive Committee and agreed to have their bio posted on the website. You go in, you read about these folks, you decide who you want to reach out to, and then from there, it's just a matter of logistics and getting your certification knocked out. So with that, I want to share just that prep course does exist. We can host a course anywhere in the world. In fact, we just hosted some courses down in Puerto Rico, I believe. And the course can be brought to you as long as it has 10 or more people that have committed to be a part of it. Folks that take the preparatory course tend to do better on the exam. However, it's certainly not required that you do that. Upgrading, I just want to mention that associate emergency manager, some folks can think that that's kind of a junior level emergency manager, and nothing can be more further from the truth. AEM is a great stepping stone towards certified emergency manager, and currently there's no fee to upgrade as long as you do it within 5 years. With that, we've reached the end of the presentation piece, and I want to give it back to our hosts so they can facilitate some Q&A. Jeff, do you have anything else that you want to mention to this crew before we give it back?
No, I think we're ready for questions and answers.
Well,
Fantastic.
Keith and Jeff, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it did answer some questions already. The only question we had so far, I think you already answered it, was regarding getting this presentation, if that's available. And then the other one was, how can somebody find more information about the CEM? Is there a website to go to?
Absolutely. Certification has a main page on the IAEM website, regardless of what council you pop up under or where you look at it anywhere in the world. You can go to certification, and truthfully, it is a lot of information on there, and I think that could be part of the reason it's daunting. And we're actually taking a look at how we can consolidate and make it a little bit more user-friendly. Everything from getting started here is a great place to, well, quite literally get started. With certification enrollment form here, you can fill this out and get access to that portal and start building out your certification application. Just make sure you have a user account already, otherwise you'll get the error that I did. There's self-assessment tools, briefs on current requirements. However, do make sure that you use the actual certification portal to look for the very specific requirements. In fact, it's we refer to the portal as gospel. It's the current, most accurate source of record for the requirements for certification. In addition to that, I pointed out the webinar series earlier. That's available, and you can go through and listen to any of the presentations. You can also, the recordings are right here. You can also look at the FAQs that we generated as a part of that. We talk a little bit about the application process itself, which maybe that's an opportunity for me to take just a moment. The test or the application, you can do whichever you want first. Focus on what would make you most successful. The only catch and caveat is you have 12 months once you do one to do the other. If you were to take and pass the exam today, you have 12 months from today to turn in your application, and vice versa. All of that, of course, comes after you pay the fee. If for some reason your application gets sent back, it's not a deal breaker by any means. You get a resubmission for free within 90 days. You get a letter from us that says, hey, we'd like a little more information on this, that, or the other. You send that back to us, and hopefully you get a note from us that says you're good to go. In addition, we review applications every odd month, right? Yeah, odd month or the review months, and then in the even months we do our actual notification to folks. If you want to reach out and find any of the actual certification commissioners and bother them, you are more than welcome to do that. Reach out to them, ask them if they'll be your mentor if you didn't find anybody else. Finally, I'll point out the Resource Center. The exam study guide has all of the references that we use to build the exam. The references are listed in there. And I think that's probably a good overview of the website, unless I missed something, Jeff, that you send people to.
There's one question that came up, but I don't know if you answered it or not, but I just wanted to, so Jessica's asking, where is the certification portal? She logged into the IEM and site and is having issues finding it. So could you walk through from the login to find the portal again, just one more time?
Sure. So from the IAEM webpage, the first thing that you need to do is you need to create an account, and you can do that by going to, put me on the spot here, since they've updated the website real recently. Getting started, let's see, certification enrollment form. If you click that, it's not going to show me the page. You all can see you must be logged in to continue enrolling, continue to log in. You'll get your account, and if you don't have an account, you can register down here at the bottom. And of course, oh, good. Thank the Lord it's saved. As a cybersecurity professional, I shouldn't be doing that, but hey. Once you go to certification, now that you're logged in, you can go to getting started, certification enrollment form, and you'll be enrolled in the portal, it looks like now. Then you should migrate over to iaemcem.org, where you will see the actual portal for the application. And I'm pausing my share so that I can get to the candidate version here. All right. Hang tight 1 second, almost there. Boy, waiting is the hardest part.
And while we're waiting for that, just one more question along the same line. So how much time realistically in that year that you have does it take to process and receive the certification?
Jeff?
So it depends on, you're asking how long does it, once you submit your application, and how long does that process take?
Well, let me read the question by Durham. It says, how much time is realistic to begin the certification process and receive the certification both AEM and CEM?
Got it. Okay, so let me kind of break that question apart a little bit. Number one, you wouldn't, to answer the last part of that question first, you wouldn't apply for both the AEM and CEM at the same time. You would pick one of the two. You can begin with the AEM certification and always upgrade to a CEM, or some folks may say, look, I've got all the credentials to meet the CEM requirement. If that's the case, you work directly on your CEM. So you would really choose one or the other. A lot of it depends on where you are in your professional career, and this is going to sound glib, but also how good you are at keeping and retaining documentation. As Keith pointed out, so much of it is, I like to tell folks when they start out, sometimes we obviously want to see your best work, but it's really the work that's best documented. So maybe you served on Hurricane Katrina, which was a major disaster event, but if you have no proof, a certificate of service, something to verify that you were there in your role, that's probably not something you want to put in your application packet. Maybe instead you went and served as an incident commander on a tornado, and you clearly have a certificate that thanks you for your time and the amount of time that you were there. That's probably something you want to include. It takes some time to gather all of that information together. I've seen some people do it in a couple of months. Other folks may take a year or more to do so. And then it also, to finish this process up, you have to schedule the exam and find time to take that test and pass it. So I would say if you're dedicated, it's not hard to get the certification within about a year's time. Some people can move much more quickly than that, but then others, because they're trying to accrue documentation, maybe they don't quite have the number of training hours that are needed and need to spend some more time catching up on that. We make allowances. You certainly have, if you need more time, there's no set that, oh, it's got to be completed very, very quickly.
And to tack onto that, I have a mentee right now who knows that September 1st we go into a review cycle, and she wants to have her certification so in time so she can get her diploma presented to her in Savannah in November. And so I picked her up as a mentee about 2 weeks ago, and in the next 6 weeks between now and, well, I guess it's less than that, about 4 weeks, between now and September 1st, she is going to complete her application and submit it, knowing that since September is a review month, she'll get notified in October whether or not she passed. And somewhere in the middle there, she's going to take her exam. So, I mean, as short as a month and a half-ish to as long as Jeff pointed out.
I would also say this: if I was considering starting this process, and maybe I'm not quite sure that I'm ready to begin, one of the things you can start doing is every time you get a piece of third-party documentation for something you've done, maybe you just did a speaking event at a local school talking about emergency management preparedness. The school sends you a thank you note saying, hey, thanks for speaking, here's what you spoke on. Start putting that in a desk drawer and start saving all of that. When I recertify every 5 years, for that period that I'm collecting data, all of those files that I'm eventually going to use for my certification go into that drawer. And so when I open it back up, I've got all that material right there at my fingertips. It saves an awful lot of time in collecting the paperwork, the verification document you need to prove recertification, or if you're just going to get started, start collecting that documentation now.
Awesome. So it looks like right now we had a good couple of thank yous. So I guess you answered the questions, both questions, in a great way. Any other questions out there? This is your time right now to be able to ask. Okay, so I have a question, and this is coming. So go through the process right now, like I said at the beginning, and you're going through the portal. I put the information in, and it came to a point where I needed to get documentation on something. And so I have my dates and job descriptions was exactly what it was. And I couldn't find my old job description from an old job a long time ago. What can I do instead of doing, instead of finding a job description from a job I had, 6 years ago or whatever, and I can't get it from HR and that job no longer exists. They got rid of it after I left. What can I do to fill that void?
So Keith, feel free to elaborate, but there are a couple things to remember. Number one, make sure you're documenting just enough time to meet the requirement. So if it was from 6 years ago and you've been in emergency management for another 6 since then, you only have to document 3 years of job experience. If you don't have a degree in emergency management, 2 years if you do. So you can look back, but you may really need to make a judgment call as to, well, how far back do I need to go to meet the requirement? The second thing is there are a variety of other ways to document that experience. You might want to get a letter from a past supervisor to say, the individual worked in this position for this period of time. We have many candidates whose jobs aren't full-time emergency management. So in that case, what we're looking for is a letter from a supervisor saying their job position says this, but 50% of their time is comprehensive emergency management. They maintain our plans, they coordinate response. If something bad happens, they do recovery. And so if we can quantify, okay, so they're spending 50% of their time every year in doing comprehensive emergency management, and they've just shown that they've worked at that job for 10 years, well, that's going to meet the minimum requirement quite easily, because 50% of the time, 10 years, that's at least 5 years of comprehensive emergency management experience. That meets the requirement for certification. So a lot of times, if for some reason you don't have that specific job description, or maybe it doesn't fully address your responsibilities, get a letter from your supervisor that talks about what you do, so that we've got some kind of third-party verification to lean back on in terms of documenting your length of service.
Cool. Okay, we got a couple of questions that are very similar. Both have to deal with master's degree. And one of them is, okay, so what says, if you have a master's degree in emergency management, does it count towards anything? Question mark. And then they received theirs in 2011, but they read somewhere that doesn't work after 7 years.
So Keith, do you want me to stab at that? Okay. So there are a couple places that a master's degree in emergency management comes into play. One of the easiest places is in your training requirements. And here, based on the amount of time since you got your degree, and you can look, may need fewer than 100 hours of emergency management training, and then you go to that grid down that Keith is highlighting now. So you figure out when you earned your degree, and if it's in emergency management, if you earned your degree 4 years ago, instead of documenting 100 hours of emergency management experience, you would only need to document 40. So we're basically giving, is that right, Keith?
Oh, you meant training, not experience.
Correct, yeah, your training, yes, correct. So basically, by using your master's, you can decrease or potentially even eliminate the emergency management requirement for the training hours. The other place it comes into play, whether it's a baccalaureate or a master's degree, when it comes to job experience, if you don't have a degree in emergency management, you need to document 3 years of comprehensive experience. But as you can see Keith highlighting, if you have a degree in emergency management, you only need to demonstrate 2 years of experience. And so somebody may have a baccalaureate degree in public administration, but then they have a master's degree in emergency management. We're looking for 2 years of emergency management experience, not 3. So that's 2 places that the degree can help you.
I think that answers the second question on education. However, there's a little extra to it regarding they have a master's degree in EM, and they're currently working on their doctorate in EM. So that being said, I'm going to kind of jump on that a little bit and add to that question. So we know that we have the bachelor's degree requirement. You can use your master's degree for your professional 100 hours of professional training, or what can you use your PhD training for? Would that be your professional training, or is this just extra stuff that you use for your research in 5 years?
Good question. You can certainly use any higher level education work towards your training requirement. So for example, I certified, got my original CEM certification. In the 5 years between my original certification and when it was time for me to recertify, I earned a master's degree in emergency management. I was basically able to take that degree and for my recertification, meet my entire training requirement just using all the coursework I had taken for that degree. So that's one way, and probably the easiest way to use any kind of upper level collegiate work that you do. Even if you got, for example, maybe a specialization certificate or stuff like that. If it's classroom training, you can probably apply it within that training block. There are a couple other places that sometimes college-related work can help you out. So, for example, there is a professional contribution that you can claim that relates to conducting research. So sometimes folks who are involved in working on their PhD, for example, may end up developing a paper that deals with a significant issue related to emergency management. That can count here. And so you're meeting for a brand new CEM, you've got to have 6 professional contributions. That research could be used here to meet one of those requirements as well. So there are a couple of other places that college level work may come into play. By the same token, there are some things you might be involved in as part of your college career that count towards the CEM or AEM requirement. So, for example, there's a membership requirement. So maybe you're a member of a local chapter of IEM or the student. If you are, as long as you can document 3 years of membership in a disaster emergency management related organization, that may also be a professional contribution you want to use to meet that 6 requirement.
So there's another question here for Monica. And this one's kind of outside the line of what we're talking about here, but I'll go ahead and throw it up there just because I think there's an importance to understanding this portion of it. So with respect to the degree in emergency management, are there any recommended universities I should be looking for? And actually, I'll answer that in this aspect of it. Look for an accredited university. And I don't want to, I'm not going to name any names, but there are some universities out there that their academic rigor just doesn't make it, and it's going to be harder for you to use that degree specifically to get jobs, I don't know if it applies to CEM or not, whether what you're looking for academic rigor from the colleges.
Yeah, I think you answered that well. One thing, though, I do want to make clear, because we do have a lot of folks who maybe they didn't start in emergency management. Maybe when they went to school, they got a degree in journalism. Or for example, my original baccalaureate degree that I earned in 1992 was in English. The education requirement, and this becomes really important for those who are thinking about CEM versus AEM. An AEM does not need to have a 4-year degree. CEM does. just be aware that if you're going for your CEM, that degree can be, that 4-year degree can be in anything. So don't think you need a 4-year emergency management degree to qualify as a CEM. It can be a degree in English. But then you're going to have to prove 3 years of experience, as opposed to if you do happen to have the 4-year emergency management degree, then you only need 2 years of experience. So that's one distinction that everybody should be aware of. So don't think, oh gosh, you know, when I was in school, I really thought I was going to be a fashion designer and that's what my degree was in. I can never make CEM. No, if it's a 4-year degree from an accredited institution, attach a copy of that degree to your application packet. That'll meet your education requirement. You're just going to have to prove 3 years of experience.
So this is a good question here. Are there any templates for the reference letters, or is there anything? And I'm gonna change it up again, Julia, just because I think I know where you're going with this. Is there any template or any style that you guys are looking for specifically as commissioners on those letter recommendations? You know, like, is there any font that you're using? Is there anything that you particularly? And this is coming from an academic guy who puts those things in my syllabus. Right? Has to be, it looks like this in the sample, or does it make a difference what the reference letter looks like to you guys?
I'll take a stab at this, and Keith, if you want to chime in. Number one, should be on letterhead, should be signed. Let me say not should, must be signed. We want to make sure that it's verified. We do like reference letters that attest to the qualifications of the candidate, and anything your reference letter can corroborate about your career is very, very helpful to the commission. So some of the best reference letters, like for example, one must be from your current supervisor. It's nice that that letter from the current supervisor says, yes, I've worked with Jeff. He started at the Salvation Army in 2001, and he as the territorial disaster coordinator. Well, that gives me a bit of corroborating that third-party verification that Keith was talking about, that, okay, now I know his start date and the position that he was in, and I've got a job description in the experience section that matches that. So if he was there from 2001 and it's now 2019, he must have the requisite number of years of experience. So you can always use these reference letters to help document some of the stuff that you're doing. And that gives us kind of that third-party verification to back up the claims that you're submitting.
And to add on to that, while you now only need one letter of reference, I can't tell you the number of times that second and third letter of reference with those corroborating statements have saved applicants from getting that dreaded incomplete letter. So just that you only need one, and it has to be from your current supervisor. By the way, your job, if you're pursuing your AEM, maybe your current job is in emergency management, and that's okay. A letter from your supervisor saying that you're, a decent human being and you work hard, that'll work for the AEM level, no problem. And while we don't ask for letters from the second and third reference, we at least do require that you give us points of contact, folks that we can reach out to that don't fall into the three classes that we can't consider, which are subordinates in the workplace, a former student of yours, or friends, relatives, or neighbors.
So, okay, there's two questions that are very similar again, but they're different. And so I'm going to sort of combine them and then I'll break them out. So one gentleman, Dan, and the other is Brian, and they're both have jobs not traditional emergency management. One's in law enforcement for the last 15 years, and he's a police sergeant, but he has his master's degree in crisis and emergency management, or he got it in May. And then the other one is a firefighter, and he has he's been currently enrolled in but he's due to emergency management. He has currently for 2 years for his as an EM. He doesn't have okay, so let's start with the first one first. So with Dan, with 15 years on as a police officer, as a sergeant, and he has his master's degree in EM. How much experience can he count towards his AEM, CEM requirements? That's the first question.
So I would say a couple of things.
I'll take it for you, Jeff. I don't miss working in the hospital environment for that very reason. I know you're not in the hospital, Jeff, today. So we run into this issue a lot, and that is with folks who don't have comprehensive emergency management as their primary job or as their sole job. And while we're seeing full-time emergency managers, and that's all they do, growing in count, we still have folks who say have 20% of their job is comprehensive emergency management while the rest of it's something else. And so what we look for is documentation that says, okay, Todd has been a full-time emergency, has been a 50% emergency manager for the last 6 years. And with documentation, third-party independent verification saying that emergency management was 50% of his job for the last 6 years, that equates to 3 years of full-time emergency management. And we can even get more granular than that. When you're submitting your work history, say, for example, you're a private contractor, or maybe you own your own business, and it's really tough to document that you have full-time equivalency. What we can do is break it down into hours, and we equate 1 year to 1,920 hours. Now, that's a few weeks short of the 2,080 hours that everybody really probably puts in, but we recognize that folks have lives. You like to you like to go on vacations. And so if you can show through that documentation that you have 1,920 hours times 2 if you have a degree in emergency management, or 3 if you don't, that's all we're looking for, whether it's based on a percentage or a number of hours for each project that you've been working on. Jeff, can you put it any better?
No, I think that's great. Apologies for the intercom system. The other thing I would add to that is it doesn't have to be paid experience. If you are working as a affiliated volunteer with the American Red Cross, for example, and you can document how many hours per week that you have given, you can add that to meet your experience requirement. We have a lot of folks who are just starting out or who get their start as a volunteer doing disaster work. If you can document those hours, you can count that towards meeting the experience requirement.
So with Brian, his question goes on from the time as a firefighter. He does not have a 4-year degree, and he doesn't feel like he wants to pursue that at this time in his life. Is his only option the AEM? And if so, what's the AEM certificate process like?
The AEM is a great option, and if you don't have a 4-year degree, that is the route you want to take. Everything that Keith has shown you, it's really the same process. The nice thing about the AEM is that there are several things that you don't have to account for in the application packet. So for AEMs, this work history, you don't have to do. When it comes down to there you go. You still need to cover a couple of the other key points. So you still need to do the references, 1 reference letter, plus 2 that just need to be individuals who can attest to your skills. But doesn't need to be in writing. Training, you still have to document 100 hours of emergency management training, 100 hours of general management training. You have to complete the essay portion of the requirements. So it requires you writing an essay on emergency management. You submit all of that in your packet, and then you still have to pass the examination. So you're basically completing several of the pieces of the CEM process, but what you don't have to document is the work history. You don't have to document the education requirement, and you do not need to document the professional contributions. You still then would follow the same process for recertification, and just be aware that as you progress, even with an AEM down the road, those certification requirements do change a little bit. You have to continue to maintain training, but then there are a phase to recertify as an AEM where you are going to have to show some professional contributions to the field. But the AEM is a great way, and I would say about half of my professional directors have the AEM certification because they're in the same boat. Honestly, we treat both certifications as the same within our organization. It's the same mark for us of professional distinction.
All right. So Pearl, she asks, her background as an emergency manager is completely volunteer. I think he answered this, but I'm still going to go through. She's on leadership team for the county's COAD. She's the chair of her sorority's emergency management team. She's in the Eastern Region ERT, or I guess emergency response team. And she's also active with the Red Cross Medical Reserve Corps, Response Corps, and served for over 8 years. Her total paid job has been an executive assistant for a biotech company. She has a BA. How should she bring out her emergency management work history with a background like that?
So a couple of things. Number one, you really want to start documenting the contact hours that you have, because you've got to, as Keith showed you, account for what amounts to 3 years of emergency management experience. I'm bad at math, so 3 times, 19, 20. If you're going to go by hours, you would have to make sure you document that if you don't have a degree in emergency management. If she does, then that's going to be 2 years that you have to document. The other piece that I would say is some of that experience. One of the things that you can't do is double dip. So if you claim it in one location, you can't necessarily claim it in another. And so a lot of times you'll have to make a choice as to where you want to, if the thing that you're doing can apply in different areas, you're going to have to decide, is it better to claim that as part of my experience, or should I claim it as a professional contribution? So, for example, I think you mentioned that she's the chair of the local COAD, or a participant in the local COAD. Well, there's both a service role and leadership role that you can claim as a professional contribution, where it may be advantageous to say, well, part of my service role is being part of that COAD. More specifically, if she's the treasurer of her local COAD, that can qualify as a leadership role. So that experience may be better served there as opposed to in the experience section. It may also be a piece, and Keith mentioned this, if you think you might be short in a couple of areas, or, for example, you've got your degree but just don't have the experience level yet, but you want to get the certification so that you can improve your resume, get the AEM. You can always upgrade from AEM to CEM at any time at no cost. So we have a lot of folks who will lock in the AEM, add it to their resume, and then if they land a job, and especially those that have emergency management degrees, they just need to be in that position for 2 years, and then they can come in again and upgrade. And if they've got significant volunteer experience, let's say you can account for 6 months, 12 months of volunteer experience with the Red Cross, well, then you only have to wait a year to then go ahead and upgrade. So it really depends, and that those kind of very specific questions is a great reason to talk to a mentor who can help you figure out where the best way to capitalize on the experience you've got, so you can maximize those contributions across your entire application.
Sue, go ahead. I unmuted you so you're able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hi from New Zealand. Thank you for hosting this seminar for us. Just wanting to know, I have 3 masters, well, almost 3 master's degrees. I have 2 in adult education, one of which is administrative and leadership, which is kind of like a BA, a MBA, and then I'm just finishing off a master's in emergency management. I've also got about 8 months, probably a year's experience with the Red Cross during the 2011 Christchurch earthquake sequence.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, outside of that, I just want to be sure I've got this right. To go for AEM or CEM, I only need 1 more year roughly experience, yeah?
How many years experience did you say you had with the Red Cross?
About a year.
About a year. So yes, so you, I'll repeat this back to you, and Keith, interrupt if I get any of this wrong, but it sounds like you've got a degree in emergency management, and you've got 1 year of experience. So with the degree in emergency management, that cuts your experience requirement to just 2 years. If you've already got a year, you need 1 more to get the CEM. For your AEM, it sounds you could start on your AEM right now because there is no experience or education requirement for the AEM. And then when you, so you could get your AEM right now, and then when you get that next year of experience, then you could upgrade to CEM at no additional cost.
Okay, great. And how much does it cost to go for the AEM?
Keith, do you know, is it for?
It's the same price as the CEM, which, oh gosh, I'll throw back here on the screen for a second. Here it is. 410 if you're a member, and a non-member is 620, and it's the same for AEM and CEM.
Okay, and that's USD.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yep. I jumped ahead, Todd, and I saw the next question on the webinar. And looking at our time, I figured I'd just go ahead and pull it up. So the question was specifically on training hours for one topic. What are about some of the trainings that are listed for more than 25 hours in the allocation chart but are reduced down? It totally depends on what the topic is or how many topics are discussed. For example, we broke out the Emergency Management Professional Program, EMPP's Basic, Advanced, and Executive Academies, and created a crosswalk so that those week-long 40-hour courses that you're taking, you can break them down in the application so you can claim more than just the 25 hours, because you're talking about so many different topics in the course. And while we do that for some courses, and we point out in the training allocation chart how you can do that for some courses are so focused on just one particular topic that even though it's a week's worth of training, we can only count 25 hours because it only covers one topic generally. So we reduced down to the 25. And the great news is this, in the actual application, one piece that is always confusing, and frankly, I think it's confusing sometimes, is in the training allocation. When you put training into the portal, the subject area is completely subjective, which means you can pick what it's called. However, if you are putting in 300 incident command 300 and 400, and those two courses together, by the way, are more than 25 hours, and you try to call one incident command and one incident management, that's probably going to get caught by our commissioners, and you're going to get reduced down to 25 hours. So when you're picking your subject areas, do so remembering that the topics should be different. They should be different, and you get to pick what subject areas you want to call them. We give you a few references and tips in the application on what those subject areas can be, but it's really your pick.
Dave, you're live. You can ask the question that you have.
No, I think my question was already answered, so I'm all set. Keep moving on.
Right. Well, we have one more question that just popped up, and this will be our last question of the day. Okay, it's about the prep course that's provided at the AEM conference. Is this open to anyone interested, or do we have to be enrolled in one of the certification programs?
Absolutely not. You can register for any of our offerings of that course. I'm pulling it up for you right now so you can see under the Getting Started section, I think we list Find a Prep Course and Exam Dates. If you're looking for a course and an exam, just look on here and look for that prep course and exam option. And anybody can take the preparatory course. It's about 6 hours long. It's a little bit death by PowerPoint, I'll tell you, but it frames emergency management in the way AEM looks at emergency management, which translates beautifully over to the exam itself, which we offer after your hour-long lunch in the afternoon. You just take the exam right there. If you want to, you don't have to if you're not ready.
Awesome. Well, Keith and Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. I think it was a great conversation, lots of good questions. And Dave, do you have anything to say at the end here?
No, just I definitely like to thank you all again, both for your time. It's a lot of great information, and clearly there were a lot of really good questions. I would encourage any of the individual questions that if they weren't answered today to check out the AEM online presence, and if not, reach out to the commissioners or some of the mentors out there who have their CEMs. They're great resources. Thanks again for your time.
All right, thank you everybody for your time. Thank you for being here, and We'll have this up at some point at the IEM website. Dave will be taking care of that part of it. And thank you, everybody, for attending. And again, thank you for our panelists for being here. Don't forget the Great Shakeout in October. Please go register for today. And there's a lot of good resources there as well. Thank you, Titan HST. And also, come listen to the show, EM Weekly. Love to have you on there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.